Dr. Matt Seaton is back for another podcast of NCI Works called Getting to Work. I'm John Spencer from Starved Rock Media. Welcome back, Dr. Seaton.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Not assuming that you have seen or heard the other podcast. And by the way, I think, Matt, this is the quickest turnaround we've ever had for a guest.
Well, I'm happy to be back. I enjoy spending time with you and recording this, and however I can be of help, you never hesitate to ask.
Well, I really think it's because you're such a handsome young man, and they can actually put your picture full screen on this video version of the podcast, and people don't have to look at me. And
yeah. Well, I appreciate the compliments, but I think that's getting pretty deep in here already, man.
Numbers on our last podcast were through the roof. I tell you, especially when I wasn't on screen. For those of you who may not know, Matt is the CFO and the Vice President of Business Services and Finance at Illinois Valley Community College. He's got a very interesting story, which I'll ask him to recap just a little bit. Where basically, Matt, you started out graduating and going into teaching band and choir at the high school level, right?
Right. So even predating that, I was thinking I'd be an architect or an engineer or something along those lines. And went to junior college in my hometown, Mount Carmel, Wabash Valley College. Had just an awesome experience at that school in looking back. And I left high school thinking something in construction, like I said, architect, engineer. I left community college 2 years later, going in to be a music teacher. So where the transition happened in my life largely can be accredited to a few gentlemen who really exposed me to the joys of teaching. They were both music educators themselves and performers for that matter. And I knew, when I was 20 years old, heading into Eastern for my bachelor's degree, that's what I wanted to pursue.
You got the bug, as it were, as far as performing goes.
Sure. Yeah. And I've been a musician, still continue to play a little bit nowadays, but when you live that life, and I was just on another call earlier today, and we were talking about learning styles, and the individual I was talking to said he's a big reader. He loves to read and do research. And I said, I can read and I like to read to some degree, but that's not my strong suit. I'm a doer, and the music really took me, it kind of latched onto me and said, you can do this. There's the act of performing, and you learn through performance. And so I found myself throughout life really wanting to get my hands dirty, wanting to get down and do the task in order to learn it instead of read about it in a book and research it that way.
Yeah, that makes such an incredible difference for people like you and me too, on a large part. It's just, show me and then let me try and let me fail and let me fail, and maybe eventually I'll figure it out. Yeah, that's not a piano behind you, is it?
No, this is I think a vintage 1970s desk set that we've got in my office here. I'm humble enough to never buy myself new furniture. So every office I've ever had has had the oldest stuff in the building, which I'm totally fine with.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, it looked enough like a piano or something that I'd ask you to play us something if it was. Yeah. Maybe your third appearance, we can have you do a tune.
There you go. I will tape it from the music room here at the college. So yeah.
That'll be perfect. Perfect. Today, we're going to talk about careers in education. And I don't know that there's much of anybody better to talk about, because you've experienced this on both sides. Obviously, going to school, working at schools from high school all the way up to now community college. And of course, you have 4-year degree as well. So where do you want to talk about?
Yeah,
you want to start with careers in education?
Well, I've pretty much run the gamut. My wife has also been in education her entire life, and so between us, I think we've held short of being a school bus driver, probably every position there is to be held in a K-12 system. And we have just a strong value for education in my family. I was the first college graduate in my immediate family, and even extended family for that matter. And then once I got my first associate's degree from Wabash Valley, I didn't stop. I continued on all the way through my doctorate. My journey began in education as a student, but then when I went to Eastern Illinois University, I got into the music education program, and I had 3 wonderful years there. Highly recommend EIU for anybody. I mean, just a wonderful place to learn. But I had the opportunity there to work with some really world-class people musically, but educationally as well. And some in particular, I still stay in touch with today, even though I'm so far removed from the music educator role that I once had. And once I became a teacher, did that for about 7 years, and had just a wonderful role model who was the school administrator in the school I was working in. And he came to me, approached me one day, said, "Think you'd be good at this, maybe it's something you consider in the future." So I went and got a master's degree, and sure enough, a few years later, I was a high school principal at another district. And then the cycle keeps happening. The superintendent at the new district I was in saw something in me, said, "I'm going to be retiring in a few years. You'd be a great fit for this district." So I went and got my superintendent's license, became a superintendent, and then transitioned to Streeter in 2014. Finished my doctorate in 2018, and the rest is history. Have had the opportunity to move to the community college level within the past year and get to work with Dr. Corcoran and the team over here. And it's just been wonderful. From an educational standpoint, though, and talking about the topic of today, careers in education, while, mine's been focused on the classroom and administration, there are so many opportunities in education for people to make very good livings supporting what happens in the classroom. Obviously, the ones we're familiar with, we've all been to school, and we know we have school secretaries and custodians and school bus drivers and classroom aides or paraprofessionals, all of which are wonderful careers. Some take some training, and some take, very little training where you could apply for the job. But there's a number of opportunities that support education from outside the education field too. I've known a number of consultants for education. I've known a number of people who work in the textbook industry, who work in the school supply and maintenance industry. And so education is such a broad sector of our economy that it has so many, other sectors that touch it, and people can get involved in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I don't think most of us probably make all those connections and realize how many different career paths, spokes on a wheel, if you will, lead off from education or feed into.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, as a lifelong learner, a huge proponent of education, and believe in many respects, our future is only as good as today's educators. Would you agree on some level with that, Matt?
Absolutely. And I think that by extension, our future is as strong as what our educators can inspire our next generation of adults to become and to do. And if our classrooms are not equipped with the very best people, then we are going to lose something in the next generation. And that's especially alarming right now with the way the world is, and the COVID situations and the political situations surrounding education. You see very, very good educators, very, very good support staff, very, very good administrators leaving the field, and that's alarming. So the demand has never been higher for qualified people to get into education, and we are working at IV right now to try and create a program where you can do 2 years here and then partner with the Illinois State University to finish a 2-year degree and do your student teaching. So we have a pathway directly to education. We hope to have that developed very soon. But another in-demand field is the early childhood education, the 0 to 3 age bracket, where daycares need providers, and especially special needs centers need providers for the very youngest of students too. Those programs are just 2-year certificates that we offer here at Ivy. And so, we're seeing a little bit of an uptick in people wanting to get into that field, which is very encouraging.
That is very encouraging. You hear about one of the biggest impediments, if you will, toward people getting jobs sometimes is that child care and the early daycare, that sort of thing. So obviously there's a great need there, and once again, great to see our community college kind of stepping in to help fill the void. That's one of the amazing things that you do, Matt. What other areas do you see need in, or opportunity, if you want to flip it around the other way?
Sure. Some unique opportunities come up, maybe not as prevalently as teaching and other fields that you would normally consider in education, but I've had a number of colleagues in the past who've become akin to a legislative liaison for education, that where they'll go work in government, go work for a politician, go work for a non-for-profit advocacy group because they have an expertise in education, and these advocacy groups want to have educated, informed people on their team to support their efforts. I've seen folks work for state and national organizations that support teachers, whether that be union-based like the Illinois Education Association or the Illinois Federation of Teachers, or more administrative-based, the Illinois Association of School Administrators, et cetera, where their sole job is to support people who are on the ground in the schools with whatever they need, whether that be more training, more education, help writing grants, you name it. And those organizations are always looking for very good people too. So you see sometimes people go into education, teach for a few years, and then transition into another completely unrelated job sector, but are able to bring their expertise out of education back into to support another role.
Yeah, that's terrific. And again, just so many doors open up through education, both literally and figuratively. Is there, it may sound like a little bit of a silly question, but there's no age limit to learning or getting into or maybe back into education, is there?
No, absolutely not. And in my career, I've had the pleasure of working with folks who had been lifetime in another field, and then late in life decided I want to be a teacher now, and so they've been able to come over to education. One in particular, an instructor I had when I was in community college was a physics teacher, but he was a retired NASA engineer, and so and later in life, after he retired from NASA, decided that he wanted to go to the classroom and was able to. Well, his class is extremely difficult. I'm not going to sugarcoat that at all. He was definitely the smartest guy in the room, let's put it that way. But he found a passion for teaching, very late in life after he'd already retired from his previous career.
That imagine the lessons he was able to pass along.
Yes. Yeah. And real life. Hey, when we were building this rocket, this is how we did this.
Yeah. It's not, I read about this in a book once. It's like, oh no, on this mission. Yeah.
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 Exactly.
Here's what really happened. You know that movie you saw that Tom Hanks was in? Here's what really happened.
Yep. And those kind of experiences are invaluable. And in my field, my original field, music, certainly, people who would go become very, very well trained, either classically or music theater, or you fill in the blank, and go out and do performing. You know, as a young person right out of college, you have the opportunity to go perform, you know, go do traveling Broadway shows, go do symphony and orchestral work and those kind of things. But then later in life, you decide to come back and you want to teach, you want to give private lessons. You know, just because you work in a school doesn't, you don't necessarily have to work in a school to be a teacher, right? We learn from everybody all around us, and there are people who make very good livings being tutors and helping coach kids on the athletic fields and et cetera, et cetera. So there's, you know, education is embedded in just about everything that we do, and the people who do it well can find many avenues for employment.
All right, Matt, if someone is interested in a career in education, whether they're a learner or they find themselves drawn to teaching others, how would you recommend them starting? What's a great first step?
Sure. Well, great first step would come, first of all, to come see us at Ivy, because right now there are more opportunities for scholarships and grants for individuals to get into education because of the shortage of folks that are out there pursuing education. And we have the natural cycle in industry where you have retirements and then positions open up. And right now there's more retirements and more people moving on from education than there are people in the pipeline to fill those jobs. So whether it be early education, early childhood education, or you want to become a high school English teacher, you can start here. We can help you get scholarships and grants. We can then hopefully in the future have a very seamless transition path right to a four-year university for you to complete. And even beyond that, we're seeing some of our local school districts incentivize folks to come work for them afterwards, meaning they'll help pay student loans, they'll give you sign-on bonuses, they'll help pay your tuition, you know. So there's a lot of opportunity to get into education right now at a very minimal cost to the individual.
Yeah, future obviously looking very bright if you're drawn to education in any way, shape, or form. You can search Illinois Valley Community College, and I have to mention Sauk Valley Community College as well in our workforce area. Matt, thanks for your time. Maybe next time I'll get you to sing or something, and our ratings will just go through the roof.
You bet, John. Whatever you guys need, you just holler, and I'll be ready to go.
Dr. Matt Seaton from Illinois Valley Community College on careers and education today on Getting to Work. For all things work in North Central Illinois, go to nciworks.org.